there's a cultural war against men going on in the moment.
The theory of toxic masculinity.
Well, Gillette's latest ad campaign is a war on man and masculinity and mankind.
I see a backlash against masculinity and a sense that there's something toxic about.
Male sexuality is seen as something toxic by feminists. We have phrases like toxic masculinity who go around, and you hear this more and more and more and more. Women are the victims, men are the perpetrators. We live in a patriarchy oppressed by white men. I've talked about this in a video where this mentality comes from is from Karl Marx. It's Marxism. You can read it in the Communist Manifesto. Karl Marx already talked about the patriarchy and people being oppressed by the bourgeoisie. This is a development, it's a post-communistic development. It's based on the same ideology. It comes from a very similar place. So a lot of the ideologies that you can find in Marxism and communism are used by the feminists today. They want real equality for all, but they want to do it by taking freedom from other people. So, for example, you have men in positions of power and they want to equalize it with quotas for women. But the data is in men work longer hours for the same positions, and this is no longer recognized. So you have a woman who's there because of her vagina, not because she works harder or because of her qualifications. And this is basically the same thing that the communists did. And it didn't end in equality, it ended in quite the opposite, that the farmers were poor, they had nothing to eat anymore, and the state used all of the money to finance the war. And I think people need to be aware of this because we're drifting more into this direction at the moment, right? In the beginning, it was just maybe like a crazy internet cult, then it went to the universities with safe spaces and canceling of people who don't agree with the mainstream view on, I don't know, feminism, gender, sexuality or whatever. This gets more and more into our common mainstream culture, and I see this trend as extremely difficult because we have a masculinity crisis already, right? We have a lot of young men who don't know where to go, what they're supposed to do. For decades and decades and hundreds and thousands of years, they were always the providers, the protectors, the strong men who fought for what they believe in, and now this is taken away. Not because of feminism, just because of the cultural development, and they don't know what the fuck they're doing. And if you put this belief on top of that men are toxic or men are aggressive or whatever, they make the decision right now to cut off their testicles, to not say something, to not speak up for what they believe in, or say or do something that might offend someone. And this is extremely, extremely dangerous. What you create with this are people who just follow everything you say. And these are not people who make a strong society. These are people who are weak and resentful. And they are full of rage and anger. And it explodes at a specific time. So they're actually extremely dangerous for society too. So I think we need to absolutely get away from this belief that there's something toxic about masculinity or bad about masculinity, about male sexuality. You can see that in my example very clear. So last year I got kicked out for communicating a sexual fantasy to my professor's wife, right? So I told her very careful manner, look, I'm embarrassed and I'm ashamed about this, but I had a sexual fantasy with you, and I got kicked out. And I asked myself, like, what if a woman says that? Like, that's going to be not a problem, right? And of course, I see why. It's because women are the major victims of sexual violence. They get afraid if they hear a guy talking openly about sexuality and things like that. I understand it. But that doesn't mean that it's right to cancel me. And it also doesn't mean, or it also shows you that there is a difference between men and women in a lot of places, sexually, socially. Yeah, so there are some fundamental differences between men and women, but you cannot just equalize that by saying, well, yeah, we're not going to have quotas for women, because you actually enforce that what you criticize, right? You say, oh, men just get their position because they're men, and then you want to fight that, but by giving women positions because they're a woman. That doesn't make sense, because you're fighting something that actually isn't there, or just to a small degree. Yes, there is gender discrimination, all of that, but it's not as big as people believe. You just want to equalize that by enforcing it on people and saying, well, she has a vagina, so we should give her the right to have a CEO position now. So it's the moral is so fucked up if you really look at it. So my message to our young men out there: don't believe this woke political correct bullshit. It's just lies. It's based on an ideology that makes zero sense if you look at it from a factual perspective. It makes no fucking sense. The LGBTQ community and political correct people, they want tolerance for everybody, but they cancel everybody who believes something different. They want equality, but they're taking freedom from people away to enforce it. And it makes zero sense, and it's absolutely dangerous. And maybe you have seen this documentary where it's called "What is a Woman?" and the guy went to a professor of gender studies, whatever the fuck that is, and said, let's get to the truth.
Just trying to start by getting to the truth, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really uncomfortable with that language of like getting to the truth. Again, in social life.
Why is that uncomfortable?
Because it sounds actually deeply transphobic to me. And if you keep probing, we're gonna stop the interview.
If I probe about what the truth is?
You keep invoking the word truth, which is condescending and rude.
Of course the truth is uncomfortable. I mean, I don't understand how the word truth can be uncomfortable, but telling the truth will always be uncomfortable for yourself and other people. The more it hurts you, the more it's likely to be true. And I don't know how this guy can be a professor. This is a house of facts and truth. A university is a place of truth. And they ban it. It gets banned way more. So my advice for young men: find something to make yourself more independent from this whole culture and whatever. I'm doing it by starting a business or building my business, so I don't need to have this dependency on our culture right now. I've met many people in the business world, when you're employed somewhere, who don't believe in that stuff either. But in my opinion, it's generally easier if you have your own company, because then you are literally independent. Let's not act like this cultural war of the woke and politically correct people is not a war against masculinity, because it absolutely is. And we should no longer be silent about this. We should speak up against people who censor, who cancel, and who take freedom away. It's enough. So let's get started. See you.